Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on the 16th of August. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily by calling the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391. You'll get that automated response there. Just save the numbers that you're dialing in, and you can get there a little bit faster next time around. Weather.gov/Alaska is your place online to get your latest weather information from your National Weather Service agency all around Alaska. You can also use the shortcut links there to the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, the National Tsunami Warning Center, or the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, which could be really important as we get into later this weekend up north, because a substantial amount of rain could fall around the Brooks Range, and especially for areas around the Sag River and east of AKwx Pass. You might want to keep close watch on that. If you can't find what you're looking for, please do let me know. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is the easiest way to find me online. I want to step out of the way here and take a look at this beautiful picture. The FAA weather camera up around Unalakleet caught this a decent day there. Temperatures in the mid to upper 50s this afternoon. Fairly mild weather for this time of the year. And yeah, a little bit of a break in the low deck of clouds, as you've seen in the last several days there. So some fair weather cumulus showing up there. A little bit of a breeze, but not too bad. A beautiful day in Unalakleet, at least when I happen to look in on you. So hello to everyone in Unalakleet today. And I look a little bit further south, and you see more of those fair weather cumulus shaping up around Angoon. Just a beautiful day there, looking to the north and west from Angoon. Looks like a nice day out on the water there. And oh gosh, a friendly little cabin there. Yeah, I'd take a few minutes there myself if you don't mind. So hello to everybody in Angoon. Again, a beautiful day in the west and in southeast, and hopefully where you are watching from tonight in Alaska. Here's a look at the fire danger around the north and the west. We're still seeing some drier conditions around the Kobuk and Noatak valleys and across the northern end of the Seward Peninsula into the interior, as well as areas around Fort Yukon and the Yukon Flats just south of the Brooks Range. You'll notice, though, if you look back to yesterday, we had quite a bit of drier conditions up across the north. What has changed in just 24 hours? Well, a cold front has dropped southward. Humidity has gone up. The winds are still with us, but they're not as bad. So the overall danger has also gone down. So chances are, as we get later and later into the summer season, and I guess maybe crossing the line over into fall for some of us, it is certainly going to be harder and harder to get more of a worse fire danger level there, especially in our northern communities there. So improvements, that's good, but also a sign of what's to come, I guess. So cooler, wetter, and probably windier weather at times. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture, and as you can see from outer space, we have several swirls there, one of those across the southern Bering just outside of Bristol Bay, and another one across the central and eastern Gulf. That is another wave of low pressure that will continue working its way northward with time. As it does so, we may see some rainfall sloshing its way to the north and east, and it looks like some of that could bring a little bit of a better chance for rainfall down south. That some of that could stretch its way as far north as Juneau as we get into the next 24 hours here. It looks like a lot of that will really focus, though, on the southern panhandle, if it all stays together, which is a really big question mark. Up north, another front is dropping its way down south, and as it hovers over the Brooks Range as we get into the weekend, there's a decent opportunity for rainfall, and that's what I was talking about earlier as we were just getting the show started. We've already had about a quarter to maybe a little more than a half inch in some cases up across the Brooks Range, and that is important, but the more significant rainfall that could come from that as we see this weather system kind of stall out here is maybe another 2 to 4 inches of rain, especially east of AKwx Pass, and maybe over the Sag River Basin. So if you're up there camping, or perhaps you know somebody that is, because they're probably not watching the show, make sure that they know that they need to be watching the gravel bars. You know, it'd be a really tough thing to be out there camped out on the gravel bar, walk away for a day and come back and see all your stuff's way downstream, if you can find it at all, because again, 2 to 4 inches of rain could certainly bring those rivers up fairly quickly. So if you're around the AKwx Pass area, Sag River, in the next several days, starting really tomorrow and going into the weekend, there could be a significant amount of rainfall in that area. 2 to 4 inches of rain is possible at this point. Now look out to the south. We don't really see a whole lot right now, south and west of Kodiak and south of Sandpoint and south of Unalaska. We expect to see a developing area of low pressure work its way northward and strengthen as we get into your Saturday and Sunday. Let's take a look at the maps and see what we see here. That will change things up a little bit in southwest, it looks like, by Saturday and Sunday. As you look across the eastern Gulf, low pressure sitting there at around 1,016 millibars, nothing much to write home about, but it looks like this could creep its way north and east as we head into tonight and tomorrow, maybe sloshing up enough rainfall into the capital city, but a better chance that it will focus on our southern panhandle communities. Earlier today, if you were around Cape Yakataga, you probably heard a little bit of thunder out there. That is what it was. A little bit of thunder and lightning popped up quickly and just as quickly seemed to go away. Some periods of rain and thunder in the region. Most of what we saw was just kind of a garden variety Prince William Sound rainfall, though, that snuck its way out into the Wrangell, St. Elias just a little bit more. Pockets of rainfall across the western interior, around Galena and eastward, up around the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, the central and eastern Beaufort seacoast, focusing on some wet weather, and low pressure again across southwest, as well as another wave here just south of the Aleutian chain. As we get into tonight, this wave out west will kind of hold there, but we're going to start to see another wave develop here across the western Gulf by early tomorrow morning. Low pressure across southeast will work its way a little bit further northward toward land, Port Alexander, and eastward, looking at at least some light rainfall, and maybe some of that sneaking its way up toward the capital city. As I mentioned, showers across the Alaska Range and the eastern interior. And here's just one wave of the cooler weather dropping southward toward the Brooks Range. And so as we get that rainfall started, notice it doesn't really go anywhere. That stationary boundary, colder air and warmer air kind of butting heads and not really winning the game. As long as that stays over the same place, the focus for rainfall could be over the same places, and that's how we get into a flooding situation. As I mentioned, there's a low here across the western Gulf and the North Pacific that should be strengthening and deepening, and this would be at 998 millibars at least by Friday. Notice the tight pressure gradient here that's wrapping all the way from Unalaska to Sandpoint to about AKwx and southward. That's going to start to bring up turbulence concerns across the Alaska Peninsula, maybe some low-end gales to get us started. High pressure shuts down the rainfall across southern southeast fairly quickly, and you notice that ridge trying to build into south central as well. So things should be generally quiet, light and variable winds in this region, but maybe some fog as well. Better chance for fog across the Bering Sea and the central and western chain. And once again, that boundary sitting across the Brooks Range could spell for a very wet period as we get into Saturday and for Sunday. For southeast, that ridge of high pressure strengthens up to about 1,030 millibars or better across the west coast of southeast and all the way into Prince William Sound. Still some showers there lingering in the region, but our low pressure system here in the western Gulf and the North Pacific deepens substantially to about 980 millibars. That pressure gradient fairly tight all the way into the central and eastern chain now, and as far north as Kodiak Island and the Barren Islands, and probably into parts of Bristol Bay. So if you're flying in and out of that region, I would expect at least some minimal weather delays, probably some turbulence. Icing potential is probably going to be marginal at best with generally warm conditions that we see. But up north, flying weather is going to be difficult as well. For the next several days, turbulence is going to be a fairly widespread concern across the Brooks Range and southward into the central and western interior. And you're going to see that in the aviation maps coming up here in just a few minutes. So watch for that. Considerable moderate probably painted across most of the Brooks Range and west. And you'll start to see that showing up more as we get into the weekend for southwest and the central and eastern chain. Out west, there is another wave of warmer weather developing across the western Bering. In the meantime, high pressure still in charge of the Bering Sea, but areas of fog will persist under that. Here's a look at temperatures for Friday morning. 40s and 50s for most of the lower terrain areas, including the Yukon and the Kuskokwim valleys there, about 44 in Bethel. As you get into the interior, Fairbanks still holding on to temps close to 50 degrees, better than that in Fort Yukon. Utqiagvik out toward Barrow in the mid-30s. Nome looking at about 49. Southeast temperatures in the lower 50s. South Central upper 40s, about 46 in Kodiak, and a high temperature there, 56 on Friday. Southeast 50s and 60s, not a bad way to end the week. Lower 60s for Fairbanks and the Tanana Valley. Mid to upper 40s for many across the North Slope. The Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound area in the 50s and low 60s for Kotzebue indeed. 54 for Nunivak Island, 56 or so around Sandpoint. By Saturday morning, look for temps still in the mid to upper 40s for many across the interior, still mild in Fort Yukon. Some temperatures getting closer to freezing there for the North Slope, 49 around Nome, 52 in Kodiak, 40s and 50s for South Central and Southeast, and high temperatures on Saturday, still pretty mild for the interior, many places in the mid to upper 60s. And now, aviation weather around Alaska. On the aviation weather now, IFR conditions are expected to hold up around the North Slope once again as we start up your Friday morning, and the usual places across the Bering Sea through the central chain should hold around IFR. With low pressure sitting in the Gulf, we also expect to see a swath of IFR all the way from Haines and Skagway stretching down through Sitka, probably capturing Juneau, and then out to sea. Most of the Gulf will be looking at MVFR and on and off IFR conditions across some parts of South Central through the Barren Islands and into Kodiak Island. As we get into the afternoon, though, we do expect to see some improvements across the Central and Eastern Gulf. Out west, though, not necessarily the case. IFR conditions all the way from the Bering Strait through St. Lawrence Island, through the Central and Western chain, and also across the windward side of the Alaska Peninsula. Up north, a little bit of improvement here, generally south and west of Wainwright to Point Hope and Point Lay. The Beaufort Seacoast should hold under IFR conditions. You'll see that's back for Saturday morning. Most of the interior looks pretty good. You will notice some MVFR around Adigan and Anaktuvuk Pass through most of the Yukon Valley, all the way down into the Kuskokwim. VFR conditions there. Southeast are looking pretty good for Saturday morning, all the way into the central and northern parts of Southeast. But for the Clarence Strait, the Dixon entrance, we expect to see MVFR, at least an IFR, probably from Ketchikan eastward toward Hyder. Most of the Gulf will be looking at IFR. That includes Kodiak Island, around Resurrection Bay, and then southward towards Sand Point. Most of the Bering Sea also holding around IFR. Not a lot of change really as we get into Saturday afternoon. The usual places will still be looking at IFR, including the Bering Strait and the North Slope. Notice the Kobuk and Noatak Valleys start to see a little more IFR, and some of that will swing into the Beaufort Seacoast. Most of Southeast, though, should be looking at VFR conditions. The Copper River Valley, the Kuskokwim Valley, the Yukon Valley in total, it looks like. And more places up around the Koyukuk Valley should be looking at VFR going into Saturday afternoon. Here's your path conditions in detail then. For your Friday planning, Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass are going to be a little bit different, it looks like. MVFR for Anaktuvuk, but we think we're going to see some IFR to start around Adigan Pass. So the further east you go, a better chance of starting out with IFR, but improvements toward MVFR should be possible, I think, as we get into the afternoon. For Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, expecting to see IFR to start the day, looking for MVFR conditions to finish it up there, so some improvements possible there, probably holding around marginal conditions through most of your Friday there. Windy Pass starting out around IFR, and then improvements expected for MVFR. Isabel Pass also expected to see some marginal conditions by the end of the day. Look for even more improvement around Mentasta Pass. Now the MVFR start will probably be fairly close to the pass, but there's a chance that it could be even better than that by tomorrow morning. So at least some improvement expected throughout the day no matter where you start off. Dehne Pass, we also expect to see instrument flight rule as we get your day started there with marginal conditions perhaps by the end. Portage Pass looking for an IFR start with some marginal improvement throughout the afternoon. The worst conditions will be on the Prince William Sound side, and then a big change there from the morning conditions. Chilkoot and White Pass starting at IFR with improvements toward VFR as we go. The freezing levels show kind of a concentric area of cooler air showing up across south central, parts of northern and southeast, all the way into southwestern Alaska. Everything outside of that zone is considerably warmer. You'll see levels there across eastern Asia that are up to about 10,000 feet plus. Levels below or southward of the Aleutian chain, anywhere from 10, 12 to 14,000 feet. And then as you go northward again, you start running back into the cooler air. So levels just off the coast of the Beaufort, looking at around 2,000 to 4,000 feet. The surface freezing line just barely visible there under the banner there. And then for southeast, you can see warmer weather just well, probably as close as Port Alexander to maybe Hyder and Gustavus north, where you can see cooler weather up around the Wrangell-St. Elias region. So still a big bubble of cold air. That's really a big point across south central and southwest. Icing potential is minimal. It's pretty high up there, about 8 to 9, even 10,000 feet. Most of that remains isolated, moderate at best, and this trend is shifting that eastward over time, so not a whole lot coming at us from the upstream position. The jet stream right now shows that very west to easterly flow, although we do have a digging trough here across the western Gulf, and what that means for us in time is a stronger southerly flow will be developing across the Gulf. Meanwhile, most of the mainland looking at that west easterly flow, about 15 to as strong as 35 knots at 3,000 feet. Wind speed's a little bit slower up across the North Slope. But you can definitely see a little bit more of that southerly flow already developing. 50-knot winds there south of Kodiak, and a ridge still holding across parts of southeastern Alaska at this time. So turbulence, where are we focused? Generally around southwestern Alaska below 4,000 feet and between 4 and about 6,000 feet across the Brooks Range and parts of the central interior tomorrow, as wind speeds are going to be the main issue there. Watch for a widespread area of considerable moderate.
Looking north and south this summer. Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dehne Regis, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Alberry, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We're here to help you find your way around the sky tonight. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west, right?
Well, for the most part.
And the moon, planets, and stars rise in the east and set in the west, too.
Uh-huh.
So how do the stars move in the north and south?
Oh, I see where this is going. We're going to do some spinning in this episode, aren't we?
Yep. First, we're going to show you the stars and constellations you can find when you face north and south after dark.
Then, we'll demonstrate how the sky seems to move over the course of a night in each direction. Hold on tight. Let's get spinning.
Okay, we have our sky set to 10 p.m. facing north any night this week. What's the first thing you notice?
The Big Dipper, of course. It's about halfway up in the northwestern sky. 4 brighter stars make a cup, and 3 more make a curved handle.
And since we're facing north, the North Star, or Polaris, should be here too. It's not terribly bright, but it should be as bright as the Big Dipper's stars. There it is, about halfway up in the sky.
The North Star is part of the Little Dipper, but good luck trying to find that. 4 of its 7 stars are too faint to see in most cities.
But finding the North Star is simple when you have the Big Dipper around. Simply connect the dots on the 2 spoon stars, continue that line over to the right, and then you'll run smack dab into the North Star.
And if you continue that line, hop over to another recognizable group of stars.
They look like the letter W.
Yep, and this is the constellation Cassiopeia the Queen. I know it doesn't look much like a queen, but the W could be her crown.
I can picture that. But the crown looks bent on one side.
Ah, I'll show you why as we go for a spin. As the night moves on, the stars in the north move like this. Notice they seem to rotate around a central point, the North Star. It's also called Polaris because it's our pole star, the star that just happens to be above our North Pole.
Yeah, like 432 light years above our North Pole. But as the Earth spins, the stars seem to make a counterclockwise circle around this spot. As the night rolls on, the Big Dipper gets lower while Cassiopeia rises up higher.
As daytime comes on, the stars are still there. We just can't see them with all the sunlight. But they continue to move around Polaris, and as we move toward afternoon, the Big Dipper is high in the sky and Cassiopeia, bonk.
Bonks her head on the ground. Ah, that's why the crown is bent.
Exactly.
Now let's face south. It's 10 p.m. and we have 2 great summer constellations just above the horizon. Scorpius is on the right and Sagittarius is on the left.
You can recognize Scorpius by the bright red supergiant star called Antares. Antares can be really twinkly when it's low in the sky and thus stands in for the Scorpion's beating heart.
Chasing the Scorpion is the constellation Sagittarius the Archer. He's a centaur, half man, half horse, with an arrow notched in his bow. In reality, the stars you can see look more like a teapot than a centaur.
You should also see 2 other bright night lights around the centaur. Those are the planets Saturn to the right and Mars to the left.
Cool. And don't be surprised to see the moon passing through. It'll be near Saturn on the night of the 20th and over by Mars on the 22nd. So, in the south, look for Scorpius and Sagittarius with the planets Saturn and Mars hanging around the centaur.
And in the north, look for the Big Dipper, Polaris, and Cassiopeia. Hey James, can we spin the Earth like really fast just for fun?
And show days and nights fly by?
Uh-huh.
Okay, hold on. Ah! Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And onto your marine weather now. Sea surface temperatures continue to be high across the eastern end of Norton Sound. Some areas well above 15 to even 16 degrees C. Same goes for the upper end of Kotzebue Sound. Warm water is found up around the Chukchi Sea. Those temperatures up around 10 to 11 degrees C. But you'll notice a fairly large swath of very cold weather, temperatures just barely above 0 degrees C or freezing across many sections of the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And you'll see why here in just a minute. There's still a decent area of sea ice holding on up there, and multi-year ice at that. Warm waters found across the central and southern parts of the Bering Sea around St. Paul. Those temperatures running around 5 to maybe as much as 7 degrees C, and you can see some of that warmer water around the Aleutians as well. Much warmer water closer to the eastern areas of Asia there, the coastal runoff, and we see similar conditions here across parts of southeast around Ketchikan. Very warm waters up north into the Clarence Strait and further north into the Stevens Passage area. Those temperatures anywhere from 15 to about 18 degrees C. So very warm water in coastal areas. Of course, where there's a lot of runoff, you're going to have even warmer water in the shallows. So interesting stuff to note. Anytime you want to check this out, head to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice and you'll be able to see sea surface temperatures there. And speaking of ice, here is a look at the sea ice edge, also found at the same website. The blue areas, marginal ice, concentrations less than 80%, white areas above 80%. Or right on the money there at 80% as well. A lot of what you're seeing here in this thicker ice is actually multi-year ice. Because of that, it is not melting away very quickly at all, and we expect that we'll probably be dealing with this for another at least 2 to 4 weeks, especially in the vicinity of Kaktovik to areas just north of Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. We have several waves of weather coming across. Some of that is going to move this a little bit further to the eastward slowly. But the other possibility is that behind each one of these systems, we'll get back into a northerly wind. So this entire pack could move east and then south and then return northward again with the next weather wave pushing this a little bit further away from shore. And so that entire cycle, it looks like it will be repeating several times just within the span of the next week or so. So a lot of changes here. But the zone between Kaktovik and this higher concentration ice here, and remember this is not a map of thickness but just concentration itself, the zone there between Kaktovik and the coastline and this multi-year ice is very, very small, so not a whole lot of wiggle room right here, especially if this is on the move, but certainly open water there south and west of Utqiagvik all the way down toward Point Lay and Point Hope. For the look at the forecast, the latest seasonal outlook, and a new one is in the works, and a whole lot more anytime you want, head to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Now, onto your marine forecast for southeast. Southerlies will continue, though pretty light around Stevens Passage, only 5 knots with a 2-foot sea. Southerlies around the Clarence Strait region, 15 knots and 3-foot seas. There a little bit of a breeze in the Lynn Canal, as you would expect. 4-foot seas expected. And north and westerlies coming down the outer coast, 10 knots up north, 20 knots down south, and 7 to 8-foot seas there outside of the Dixon entrance on Friday. A little bit of a southerly flow develops as we get into Saturday, with low pressure strengthening out toward Kodiak Island. High pressure still in charge, though, of southeast. You'll get a 10 to 15 knot wind on the inside with 2 to 3-foot seas there for your Saturday. For south central, light easterly winds inside of Prince William Sound, 2-foot seas expected. There's southerlies in the northern Gulf, and you'll get into a little bit more of an onshore flow over the Barren Islands. Southeasterlies, 3-foot seas there on a 15-knot wind. Southerlies coming up Cook Inlet as well, about 2-foot seas expected for your Friday. A little bit of an increase in the wind as we get into Saturday. Gales coming up there around the Barrens, 40 knots with 13 to 14-foot seas. Again, with that low pressure system out in the west and south. 10 to 20 knots across Prince William Sound and the northern Gulf. 30 knots outside of Resurrection Bay. Looking for seas to come up to about 7 to 10 feet there. Still small seas inside of most parts of Cook Inlet. 20 to 30 knot winds across southwest and Bristol Bay. You're looking at 3-foot seas for your Friday. Same goes for Shelikof Strait on a northeast wind up to 20 knots, 25 knots east of Kodiak Island, 25 to 30 on either side of the Alaska Peninsula as we get into Friday. Big change for Saturday there. A lot of wind coming in with 22 to 27-foot seas across the North Pack. Looking at 35 to 40 knot winds there. Gales coming up across the southern Bering Sea and Bristol Bay as well, 35 to 45 knots as you head down the coast. 21-foot seas there north of Cold Bay. So watch the wind on Saturday. Conditions will be changing quickly from Friday night onward. For Friday across the chain, 15 to 20 knots in just about all areas except for areas south of Unalaska to Nikolsky. 5-foot sea there, 6-foot seas south of Nikolsky. Otherwise, a north and easterly wind there with 4 to 8-foot seas in most areas. And as you would expect, Saturday is also going to see some changes. Southerlies out west around Kiska to Attu, but for the central and eastern chain, you're looking at gales at least 40 to 45 knots sustained. 18 to 23-foot seas are expected, with northerlies coming into Unalaska and south of that, south and west of the Alaska Peninsula. So watch for rough conditions to develop quickly and sharply as you get into Friday night and Saturday. As you look at the west coast on Friday, not so bad. South and westerly winds north of Nunivak Island, south or northeasterly winds out of Kuskokwim Bay and into the Pribilofs, 10 to 20 knot winds there with a 3-foot sea. As you get into Saturday, you can see the seas coming up here outside of Bristol Bay. Northerlies develop and strengthen around St. Paul and St. George. Northeasterlies inside of Kuskokwim Bay, 35 knots with an 11-foot sea. Everything else really doesn't change a whole lot. A south and westerly wind for many areas north of St. Matthew and Nunivak Island, 10 to 20 with 3 to 6-foot seas there on Saturday. Up north, southwesterlies continue to be a little bit on the stronger side for the Kuskokwim, or the Kotzebue Sound region, I should say, 25 knots with a 5-foot sea there. North and westerlies for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast, 15 to 20. And then there's that reversal we were just talking about, east to northeasterly winds coming in across the Beaufort Seacoast over the ice up to 20 knots, and an onshore flow continues for the Chukchi Coast with 6-foot seas there on your Saturday. Let's recap the weather as we see it coming your way for tonight, tomorrow, and into Saturday. A front will come into the Brooks Range and stall. That could be the focus for some heavy rainfall, especially around the Anaktuvik Pass area and into the Sag River, maybe as much as 2 to 4 inches of rain. So folks with equipment, property, or just gear out on the gravel bars, you might want to think about moving that quickly because rain will be coming and focusing on the same old areas we get into Friday, bringing those river levels up quickly. A look down south shows that strengthening weather system across the western Gulf, and as we get into Saturday, you can see how it's focused right across southwestern Alaska. That will bring up aviation concerns and certainly marine concerns that we just saw. A little bit of light rain possible in southern parts of southeast. Thanks for watching. See you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.